Hi guys, and welcome to the Team VVV podcast for all your weekly racing game rambles. So I'm Kevin, filling in for Martin, who has been lucky enough to watch the recording of a Top Gear episode. So we'll no doubt have a catch up with him soon. This week's competition, we can win a code for Grand Prix Rock and Racing on the PlayStation 4. So do check out the site for more details on that. Anyway, tonight I'm joined by Alan.
Hello, viewers.
And Ed.
Hi, everyone.
So we are approaching April in 2017, which promises to be probably the best year for racing games that I've known in a very long time. So we're just the year is bubbling up now. We're seeing more and more interesting news. So I think to start things off, we're going to look at the dirt racing content in iRacing, which is a pretty big deal. We've seen a few games touch and dabble on the dirt, such as Gran Turismo. I believe it was Gran Turismo 3 which first introduced dirt racing, and of course we're going to see it in Project Cars 2. But with iRacing, I feel it's probably the first really well-established brand that's really sort of focusing on, a really focused effort on dirt racing outside of, dirt racing sims such as Dirt Rally and Richard Burns Rally. So in terms of content, we have a number of dirt tracks. I believe there's 4 currently available, and also have the dirt sprint cars, dirt late models. We've got some dirt street stock and legends cars, as well as some NASCAR World Truck examples. So plenty of content there. So guys, does dirt racing in a simulation interest you? What's your feelings about this?
Well, I think it's an addition that we've long wanted to see in iRacing. iRacing move very slowly, very meticulously in terms of adding to the title. It's not just about adding a few tracks, it's about adding a whole series and making sure that everything works correctly and it's thoroughly tested, and making sure that the visual elements feel realistic. And there's a lot to it in terms of iRacing. They don't take any of this lightly. So it's been something that's been talked about for a long time. It feels like something we've been really sort of waiting for, and potentially, this could be the start of a new avenue for iRacing. How far it's going to go, though, that's going to be interesting. I mean, is it just going to be a bunch of trucks on ovals skidding around, or do they have aspirations to take this completely off-road in terms of rally in the future? You just never know. It could be interesting with iRacing, and it moves them away from purely laser scanning environments, and perhaps using other forms of techniques for scanning environments. But no, I mean, I haven't played it myself yet, and I haven't had any feedback on the handling yet, but I'm certainly sure that with their tire model and their constant revisions, that they're going to find a nice balance in terms of an intuitive car model. I think it's an exciting new direction for the title.
I mean, in terms of dynamic tracks, I mean, iRacing is leading the way there. And of course, with their dirt, they're going to introduce their sort of dynamic track technology into the dirt. So it really is something we've probably never seen in this much detail before. But of course, dirt racing is not going to be for everyone. I mean, Ed, you're our resident drift expert. Would you be taken to the dirt for some drifting action?
Maybe. I think some of the cars that they're introducing in this update are probably quite interesting. But it's going to be weird because it's not like dirt, like how you might imagine it, or like a rally game or anything. It's not thick mud or anything like that, or changing surfaces. It's sort of like a really dusty track. So it's slightly different. But I don't know. For some reason, I've got this image in my head when they first mentioned dirt racing. I think there was some sort of like pre-alpha sort of images that went out of like almost like a barger truck or something like that was jumping over these mounds of dirt. It was really basic. There was no like scenery or anything, but that made me think that they were going to sort of go in some sort of weird direction. But actually, where they've ended up is completely logical for iRacing. It's very big in terms of oval racing, iRacing. So it totally makes sense of where they've gone with it.
I like the fact that they've not just introduced one track and a number of cars. They've introduced 3 or 4 tracks, and they've got multiple disciplines of dirt cars, like the sprint cars and the late models. very different styles of driving. The sprint cars in particular, you really have to go full throttle to keep your downforce. Like it's very tricky beast to handle. And the fact that they've essentially delayed the content, so they've got this massive package on release, really does show that they're really serious about this dirt stuff. And I remember back to when they they first mentioned dirt. I think it was an April Fool. I think it was April the 1st where they brought out the video, and you see a guy in a scientific science overall, and he had the magnifying glass looking at the dirt, and we thought, come on, this is an obvious April Fool. And then some people were saying, no, this looks real. There was a bit of confusion at first, but and then eventually they did confirm that dirt was coming. So it was a surprise for some. I mean, some could see for it, others couldn't, and so it was good to see. And like you say, Alan, will they branch out to rally racing, traditional A to B point racing? Because a lot of these companies, they're looking for challenge, and if you're doing a certain thing for a number of years, you want new challenges. And that's why you see these, like Assetto Corsa recently have been bringing out their own fictional tracks. For me, that could be a sign that perhaps in the future they may be looking at some sort of open world title. They have expressed interest before, so it's good to see these companies that are known for one particular thing actually branch out and give us some new and exciting content, even if it won't be to everyone's taste. So it's really good to see that.
Yeah. No, we'll wait and see, like you say, see how it develops. But they've never updated anything by halves, and I think it's going to be something you're going to see with rapid updates as they get the physics just as they want them, and the way everything reacts. You'll probably see a lot more additions coming for that in the next couple of years.
Right, I think it's fair to say that perhaps the most anticipated game for us this year is a game called Project Cars 2. Yes, according to the former Stig, Mr. Ben Collins, he says the Project Cars 2 has absolutely cracked, that's a quote, the handling. Now, we was lucky enough to have a hands-on with the game recently. Ed and Alan attended an event. Did it feel more Assetto Corsa rather than Project Cars 1 in general, the handling?
Well, I think for those that haven't listened to our sort of initial impressions, and I'll sort of reiterate that, I think that with the assists on, we weren't able to really assess the game because there was assists on only. There wasn't the option to turn them off. And we weren't really able to assess the full sort of dynamic physics of the game at this stage. I think just commenting on, obviously, Ben is an amazing driver, and I think sometimes when you go to a racing driver and you say, hey, we've got this new racing game, and they think, it's just, they think of pole position from Namco back in 1980 or something. They don't, and then they sit down, they play a game, and they're like, oh wow, that was amazing. That was like racing a circuit. I can use this for practice. In terms of actually communicating all the physics, that's a whole load of detail sometimes, and I think sometimes people get caught up in the moment. Also, I think the problem is, people sometimes see celebrities as mouthpieces. So whereas in Need for Speed, they are. Yeah, Ken Block, Need for Speed's brilliant, he'll tell you, because there's a man writing a paycheck behind him telling him to say that. With people like Ben, he's actually racing and consulting on this in great detail. And I think that with Project Cars 1, there was elements to the handling that was very good. There was tuning. I've not had the problems a lot of people had. I've had massive enjoyment out of Project Cars, but some people have had great issues with it. But you can tune it and get more out of it. But I think with Project Cars 2, it's finding a complete balance of all the physics and everything else. And I think he certainly, Ben certainly sounds confident that it's going in the right direction. I think that we all should be reasonably confident that we have Project Cars, which for me, it's the best handling tarmac racing game on console. Yes, still is. Handles better than Forza Motorsport, which is up against. What is it up against on the PlayStation? Nothing but Drive Club. So it's still the best handling console game that's out there. The only problem is it wasn't great with a controller. Now, I say it wasn't great with a controller. Some cars handled okay with a controller. Yeah. Some cars did not. And cars like the Ford Sierra didn't handle very well with a controller. They were extremely difficult to get around the course. Whereas others, like there was a BMW I was racing around the Nürburgring at the time, I got around okay. It wasn't a problem to drive. So it's getting that balance across all cars. And I think we even noticed, me and Ed, when we were testing the new game, that there was a great difference between the two cars. and we were playing them both and realizing one handled an awful lot better with a controller than the other one, which wasn't terrible. It was just a bit, I don't know, a bit jerky in its input, if you like. Ed, what did you think?
Yeah, I could definitely second what you're saying about the controller inputs. The GT3 Mercedes that we were racing in, the one with all the aero and stuff, was definitely more easy to handle as you're going around corners. Maybe it's something to do with how much steering there is on that sort of car. Maybe because there's a lot more steering input in the same sort of distance that you're making on your joystick. Maybe they haven't quite calibrated that properly yet, but I think obviously the main thing for us was that the traction control in particular was very intrusive, especially when it came to the wet. There was one particular corner on Fuji Speedway. I mean, Fuji, when you're driving it normally, it's one of these courses that has all these corners that have got big sweeping corners coming into tighter ones. So you're really testing the braking ability of cars coming round big corners where they've got high G-force, and you're having to still slow the car down for a much tighter turn. And that, in the wet, really shows what the physics is doing. And at that point, the traction control was going, whoa, man, you're way close to spinning off here, and I'm going to slow you right down. It's sort of like when you made you go half throttle the entire time. So it was actually really hard to try and get a feel for it. The only time where we actually managed to get anywhere with without any traction control intrusion was on an ice circuit. So I don't really know how much I could probably tell you about the physics when I'm driving on ice. It's a bit difficult. It was definitely more grippy than I thought it was going to be.
Okay, interesting.
But yeah, from playing it then, I'd say we could definitely say it's an improvement on Project Cars 1. Whereas in Project Cars 1, when you went past the limit of grip, is where the physics really sort of fell over really at times.
Yes.
It depended a lot on what sort of car you were driving, to be honest. But when I was going beyond the limit of grip on the ice circuit, there was a level of control that you could find. There's always a bit of a sweet spot when you're in a slide with a car, and I could find that sweet spot. Where it wasn't quite right sometimes was in the sort of transition and weight transfer from one direction to the other. Sometimes the force feedback wasn't behaving in a way that I could quite put my finger on. But I mean, it was really early days when we were playing it then, and obviously one example on an ice track are probably not the best idea.
I struggle with the ice track, but I found that my car kept pulling to one side, and I don't know why. So I found that quite frustrating. It just wasn't really working for me at this stage. I can't remember the exact issue now though, but I just couldn't get the car to go in a straight line, honestly.
So I found sometimes if you slid into the banks of snow either side, the snow sort of sucked you in and pulled you off the track.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. That might have been it. I don't know.
It was,
like you said, Alan, you know, it's a tricky business, isn't it? Creating a sim racing game that works well with the controller. I guess one example which does it well is Assetto Corsa. You know, that's pretty, you know, compared to Project Cars 1, it's so much more refined. It's very playable with the controller. However, the problem that Assetto Corsa has, of course, is with the automatic gears. I'm assuming it's still the same. I haven't been on there for a number of days now, but assuming the problem is still there. You know, when you're playing with a controller, more often than not, people will play with automatic gears. It is a bit of a handful with manual using the controller. So it seems to be a bit hit or miss so far with in terms of controlling sims with controllers, which is a problem that only existed recently when we have, of course, all these sim racing games come into the console. So I guess this is sort of teething problems for this new platform, which is becoming more and more viable for sim racing.
Well, it's all down to the fact that if you speak to a game developer, they'll say that you can either develop a game purely for the controller or the steering wheel. You can never actually really design it for both. You can amend the control for the other thing, but there needs to be a core control method as part of the design. So a lot of console games, classically, like Gran Turismo and stuff over the years, have been designed with a controller in mind. You know, there weren't many wheels on the market. That's changing now. So they're all having this problem with input in terms of how the severity of the steering when you're using the analog, how quick the steering kicks in, the degrees of rotation and what it's trying to work with. So when you're using a controller, you'll see the wheel sort of flicking from side to side rather than gently steering into a corner. And it's always a great challenge. It's a similar thing with bikes as well. When if you had perfect control with a bike, your biker would just be swinging from either side. But in real life, a biker positions his body, hits the brakes, and he's ready to lean for the corner before he even gets there. That's a number of animations compared to, of things happening before you get to the corner that gamers cannot do, because gamers just have to react. So with cars, it's getting that balance just right and making sure that the rumble is where it needs to be. The feedback is nice and quick, but generally speaking, it's just about an intuitive feel for each car, so you feel like you have something where you can understand the weight, you can understand how it's leaning on its suspension. It feels nice and gentle in the way it's moving. It's getting all that just right, so it's about tweaking. So there's a lot of cars and for them to set the controller up to get it just right. But it's so essential for Project Cars 2 to get that right. I mean, Project Cars 2, they've got two major boxes to tick: controller inputs, 2 bugs. If they got bugs in there, then people will slate it to the end of the world. So if they end up with a stack of bugs thinking, oh, we're going to need a week 1 patch and maybe a week 2 patch, don't bother releasing it yet. Just delay it, because it's just going to cause more harm than good. The more we're learning about the game, the more we're realizing just how big it could potentially be. But already we know it's going to be a hugely complex title. So, I look forward to seeing how it's going to develop. But at the same time, I don't envy them in terms of tweaking everything. But I do look forward to testing, say the handling again in a future build, and we should have some more content on the channel in late April.
Yep. So recently they've been teasing some upcoming cars for Project Cars 2, and I think it's fair to say that they're really trying to add some real variety to the car roster. So one such car is the Mitsubishi Evo 6 Time Attack car, which is coming, which has 940 bhp. So it kind of reminds me of the Radbull MX-5 in Project Cars 1, just an absolute bonkers version of a well-known Japanese car. So it's good to see that. And we've also had the announcement of the 4 sort of Skyline stroke GTRs that are coming. So it's a good range of variety there throughout the ages. We're talking 80s and 90s and noughties indeed for Skylines, R35s. We've got the DR30, which is this sort of silhouette racing car, which you may remember from I think it was GT2, I believe. A bonkers car, I might add, one of my favorites from the game. We've also got a GTR Nismo 2017 edition. So it's good to see more Japanese cars, because some racing sims do have a general lack of Japanese cars. Assetto Corsa is one such game. They do have car packs, including Project Cars 1 actually had a Japanese car pack, but they tend to be DLC rather than in the base game, I find. So it's good to see, assuming these are indeed coming to the base game, it's good to see more and more iconic Japanese cars in the car rosters. That's all good.
And on the bright side, I will say that if you're playing with a Nissan GTR Nismo GT3, you can pretend you're playing GT Sport if GT Sport's not released.
Exactly. So I think when we were at that event, when we were trying Project Cars 2, pretty sure while we were grabbing some sushi, I heard Andy Tudor talking about how there was so many Japanese cars in this game.
Awesome.
Can't confirm anything, but it was definitely bragging.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing them. I mean, I like seeing these different cars in there, and you know that they're going to have some decent audio, because they've had, they've been no slackers at audio at Slightly Mad Studio over the years. So they're going to get the audio right. If they get the handling right, that feeling of power. I mean, they did all right in Project Cars 1 with the what was it? It was an Audi GT car, GTO or something. I can't remember now, but I was driving it around Rapuna circuit, and it was great. It had loads of grunt and a great feel to it in a race, and amazing. So some really nice automotive goodness I'm seeing so far in this roster.
I've got my fingers, toes, arms, legs crossed that they've got an R32 in there as well. So they can't announce all these Skylines and not have an R32 in there.
Yeah, I mean, there was some people remarked on that. Like, I love the Calsonic R32 in the blue livery. That is legendary, and you know, the Nismo R32. I love the R32 actually because of its sort of understated look. It's almost like a beast dressed as a mouse. You know, if you can't see the lights against one of those things, you think you've got the beating of it, and then it will just leave you in its dust. So it has that really sort of understated look, which really does appeal to me.
Ed, in terms of Japanese cars, you're our man here when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Tell me a few Japanese cars that you would love to see in Project Cars 2.
Any JZX car. So there are 3 models that they made in Japan that are all the same chassis sort of thing. 3 Toyotas that are the Chaser, the Mark II, or the Cresta. And the Mark II is always the best looking one. I don't care about all you guys that love Chasers. Mark IIs are always better. So if there was a JZX 100 Mark II, that would be awesome. But it's not really got a place in Project Cars because it's not a race car. So in terms of race cars, if there was like old 70s Celicas maybe, or N2 AE86s, N2 Starlets, old when the Starlet was rear-wheel drive. What else?
Some of these, though, I mean, I will just point out that there are like Toyota MR2s, Mark 1s and Mark 2s actually have their own racing series as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can have, I mean, I would love to see a Toyota MR2 Mark 1 and Mark 2 in there in various different guises. I mean, some of the modified kits for the Mark 2s are spectacular. So I don't care about the Mark 3. It doesn't interest me. Those first two, you know, beasts, you know, it's like you say, the Toyota Supra, you know, stuff like that. You know, I'd like to see some Supras in there and stuff. And, you know, like you say, they have various racing series, you know, so there are some great cars in there.
I mean, if they were having a look at that Time Attack Mitsubishi, maybe we could see some other huge Time Attack cars, like probably definitely see some Subaru WRXs, or maybe they go over to Japan and have a look at that S15, the Advan S15 that set the Tsukuba lap record a couple of years ago. That's a pretty amazing looking car. There's so much. It's ridiculous. There's so much they could do. I mean, we've already seen with the Project Cars 1 and the MX5, the Mad Mike's MX5 that they brought into the game. Maybe they want to bring in some other drift cars. There's plenty to choose from.
It's making sure though that, I mean, it's like you said on Assetto Corsa, there's like one really good car that everybody drifts with, isn't there? On Assetto Corsa.
Yeah, the E30 is what a lot of people resort to. Yeah.
So I mean, really, it would be nice if you had. So you know, it's all right having these cars if nobody plays them, because everyone says, "Oh, well, I'm only going to drift in that one because it's the best," and you end up with 10 cars on the shelf nobody uses. Wasted sort of investment, really. So it's about making sure that all the cars have a unique but intuitive handling.
Yeah. And also varied levels of power and grip and characteristics. So you could have something like I don't know, some massively overpowered thing like that MX5, or a Skyline or something with loads of power, or a 370Z or something with, you know, 1,000 brake horsepower V6 in it, like Chris Forsberg's car in America. You could do something like that, and then you, on the other hand, you could maybe bring in an AE86 with, I don't know, just like a carbed 4AG 16 valve, which is, I don't know, making 140 horsepower at best, and it's just something you got to really chuck into big corners to get it to slide. I mean, there's totally different ways of drifting, but they'll appeal to all spectrums of people. So there's different things.
An AE86 would be a great inclusion. I don't think I've heard that's on the list yet, but it's sort of one of those cars that really should be in every game when they're going to include Japanese cars.
Yeah, it's a bit of a legendary car, really.
Mm.
I mean, I think it would be awesome if they had the N2 spec 8086 with the over fenders and the racing engine, which was produced for the racing series, because that would be an amazing car to have just like a one make race with. That'd just be insane. If they had a few good Japanese tracks like Tsukuba in there, and then just N2 A86 is just screaming round at 11,000 RPM, that would be pretty special.
Yeah, I mean that's what you need, something like that. Like you say in Honda, sort of S2000 or something. You know, you need these various different types. So whether someone modifies a Civic but makes it into a racing form or something, you know, there's lots you can do with various different types of cars. But you know, either way, you know, whether they're just for, you know, we've just really catered a lot on drifting here, but it'd be nice to see various sort of Japanese sort of motorsport cars in various different categories, and it's great that they're looking for that selection. So last year when we talked about Forza Horizon 3 having an amazing selection of cars, varied, and it looks like this year, so far at least, that you know, there might be more cars in Gran Turismo Sport, but there could be a greater variety of cars in Project Cars too. So certainly a lot to look forward to.
Yep. So just when you thought we had enough of the Porsche packs for Assetto Corsa, we're going to mention it once more. Well, we're going to mention it even more in the future, but at the moment, the Porsche 911 RSR is available now for the PC and comes as parts of the Porsche Pack Volume 3 DLC. So if you've already purchased that, you will, of course, get the car for free. So this car was initially supposed to be in the Porsche Pack, but for whatever reason, it did get delayed. So Kunos have now stuck to the promise, and it's now available for PC owners. In terms of consoles, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 owners will have to wait a little bit longer, as has been the case with pretty much everything they've brought out. No release date yet has been stated, but they have mentioned the dreaded word soon.
Yeah, soon. I think they said something about the private lobbies coming soon as well.
Yeah, so, sometime in April, I believe. But yeah, so more Porsche Pack volume stuff. Just when we thought we had enough.
Well, yeah, enough said about that.
Yeah.
Right, so we're going to move on to some MXGP free news. So originally scheduled for early May, the launch date has now been pushed back to May 30th for Europe, which includes Australia, New Zealand, the Middle East, and South Africa. And unfortunately, those in the US will have to wait now until June 20th. However, one good piece of news is that the game will now feature manual scrubs. So this was something that a lot of fans had a bit of a grief with, which was the fact that the scrubs were canned animations. So if you did a scrub and you wasn't able to land it, you were stuffed basically, because the scrub had to play out the animation. So if you didn't get enough airtime, that was it. You were going to hit the deck regardless. So it's good to see that Milestone have been listening and have introduced manual scrubs at last.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting addition. I mean, they've shown a trailer running at 30 frames per second. It's looking a bit rough in the trailer compared to our early gameplay. I don't think it necessarily shows off the best of the game,
No.
but I don't know what format that's running on. But yeah, it's good old Milestone and their unspectacular trailers. But it's nice to see that it's included in the game, and I am looking forward to the next hands-on.
Yeah, I mean, one complaint that people did have is the overshooting of the jumps.
Yeah,
but in this gameplay, it seems a lot better. I feel it seems like the bikes are landing on the dips as they should, whereas before they would overshoot the jump, land on a square piece of land, and instead of the rider buckling and perhaps coming off the bike, the rider was able to smoothly land and essentially not get punished for overshooting the jump.
And maybe the scrubs were helping with that. They were doing the scrubs and then they were landing properly. So if you don't do a scrub, you might overshoot. The problem is you can't have people falling off their bikes all the time every time they land awkwardly, because it would just be too frustrating for people who are not that great at the game. So, it is a difficult balance that they've got to find there in terms of making it fun. I mean, I can already tell you that the version I played was very challenging getting around the course without making. There's so many bikes to avoid, and rivets in the dirt and everything else that it's quite challenging. So
it is. I mean, it's a complicated game, isn't it? If you opt in, you could have, you obviously you're steering your bike, you're using the throttle, you've got your rear, your front brakes, you're able to position your rider, the rider's weight. So, you're doing all this with a controller, and it's like your fingers are constantly in a battle, if you like, and there's a lot to it. So it's not really a pick up and play game unless you turn all the assists on, perhaps. But it's one of those games that you really do need to put the hours in to get the most out of.
Yes, absolutely.
Having a look at the video that they've released of the Scrubs in action, you could see that there was one of the jumps that he did where he actually timed it a bit better, and it made his jump a lot shorter in height. And it looks like it's going to be a bit of a skill to master when you sort of time it as you leave the top of the jump. So that's quite good. I think it's encouraging.
Really, with a game like this, you should be coming off the throttle just as you go over the peak. So essentially, you're coming off the throttle to limit your airtime. But that's all well and good. But if there's no punishment for overshooting jumps, then why do players have to do that when they can be faster just by gunning over these jumps? So it's like you say, Alan, it's going to be a balance they need to find between sort of simulation and people that are able to pick up and play. So it's a tricky balance, as is always the case for these sort of simulation titles. So it'd be interesting to see where it actually lands, so to speak, on the final game. So.
No pun intended.
So let's move on to some GT Sport goodness. We just simply cannot get enough of these incredible animated GIFs that have been on the internet. And I think it's fair to say, in certain lighting conditions, my goodness, GT Sport looks incredible. I find with the lower light, it tends to look even more amazing than it does in, say, the daylight. But even so, even in daylight, Polyphony have worked wonders on this game. Okay, we do have a moan about the game, myself included, where we're talking about shinier and shinier cars. But honestly, I don't believe any of us perhaps expected graphical fidelity on this level on the PlayStation 4, or at least the PlayStation 4 Pro. So in terms of graphics, they certainly, they look like market leaders currently. I think it's fair to say.
For me, I'll disagree that I did expect this. I expected, and in fact, it's still not quite to where I'd like it to be. I was still expecting or hoping for a little bit more environmental detail. It seems to me that a lot of work's going to the cars and the reflections and the lights and stuff like that, but a lot less detail is going into some of the environments so far. So, I'm still, the jury is still out to me in terms of some of the environments. Yes, Nürburgring will look great. Brands Hatch will look great. I don't care about Nürburgring. It doesn't interest me. But there are other circuits. I just want to see more circuits. I'm not seeing enough game yet. So, no, replays look nice, but to me, it's replay. I want to see in-car and how that looks. They have improved in-car. I will mention that this week they improved the reflections of the windscreens, which now look much better. Very important to get that right, because it gives you that greater intensity feeling of actually being in the car rather than having no windscreen, which is how some games look. Assetto Corsa does a good job of that, actually, in terms of sunlight on the glass.
Yeah.
So it obviously looks impressive, but it still needs more for me in terms of the background detail. And I just want to see that Tokyo circuit done right. And another screenshot's released on it recently, the Tokyo circuit. And as far as I can see, they've done nothing. They've not added any of the tarmac detail. They've not added any Armco barriers or catchment fencing. There's no life to the circuit. It's like driving around Tokyo motorway while it's closed. That's it. Or after they've re-tarmacked it, the whole thing. And after your race, the tarmac won't change. There won't be any more rubber or detail. It's so in that sense, I'm disappointed with what I'm seeing so far. Perhaps I'm hoping for too much, but it's the sort of thing that we're going to see in Forza Motorsport 7 and Project Cars 2. So, it'd be nice to see it in Gran Turismo as well. It's going to be an interesting comparison. Either way, Gran Turismo will run better on the PS4 than anything else you'll ever see because it's being optimized to the max.
Yeah.
So, it's incredibly impressive. But I still look at the work done by Evolution on Drive Club, and I'm still so impressed with what they managed for a launch title in that game.
It's just a shame, though, isn't it, that the VR didn't really live up to that sort of level of excellence, if you like. But
Sony closed the company down, and so unfortunately that just meant that the team didn't really have a chance. They didn't have a chance to optimize their game. So it was an unoptimized game thanks to
Sony,
thanks to Sony deciding that was that. You know, I still find it hard to believe they shut the studio down, but you know, there you have it. So yeah, Gran Turismo obviously it looks amazing in the GIFs, and I'm not you know, debating that. It does look amazing, but you know, that's a replay. We're not seeing many GIFs of the actual gameplay, are we? If you notice,
no.
So let's see some gameplay and see how it looks then.
And of course, the main features are the sort of iRacing system, damage, which is one element that really actually worries me because we haven't seen much damage. You know, we've got the cosmetic damage with the scrapes and whatnot, and we see cars bouncing off barriers. That was another thing that concerned me. So it looks like GT Sports will once again fall into that category. That's you know, we have this very sort of rudimentary damage system.
Yeah,
which is a real shame. You know, because when it's going up against the likes of Project Cars 2 and Forza Motorsport 7, you know, we just don't know what they're going to come out with, but you can pretty much bet that they're going to be more impressive than GT Sports in terms of damage. So tough competition. You know, it could be shown up by these games. So it'd be interesting to see where the sort of balance of power, where it will shift, you know, in the coming years based on these titles coming out this year. So
it's a huge year, but you know, just remember this, you know, when you see the Xbox Scorpio that nobody's talking about comparatively right now, and you see the massive multi-million-pound ad campaigns that Microsoft will put across the mainstream media, and you see the massive campaigns that Sony will throw at Gran Turismo, they're just going to be all over you later this year. So, you know, it's but how well will they sell in comparison? It will be interesting.
They're all going to hurt each other. And another game that we haven't mentioned, which will also be sort of lumped into that big pot in terms of marketing and stuff, is the new Need for Speed 2017 game.
Yeah. No idea how that's going to turn out.
No.
Need for Speed. This year is a very important year for Need for Speed. If Need for Speed is poor quality and it doesn't sell well, what does it mean for the future of that brand? I honestly think it could be curtains for that brand if this version falls apart and doesn't sell well at all, and it's a rubbish game, frankly. If that happens, then it could be really, really bad for the Need for Speed brand. Need for Speed not being the big brand it was for some years now, and it's living on its past that once Need for Speed was there. And to be fair, a lot of people go on about Need for Speed Underground 2, which wasn't a great game. It was a shoddy game, and it had a number of bugs in it. And a lot of people just seem to have overlooked that because the EA marketing machine told everyone they should buy it, when in actual fact the game itself wasn't that solid. It was broken online, and there was a number of issues with it that people seem to overlook. Even Need for Speed Most Wanted in 2005 was a great game, but it wasn't. It had shoddy frame rate. It wasn't fully tested. It wasn't great. You know, it was a good Need for Speed game, but it was EA kicked it out the door before it was finished, and people forget that. Need for Speed Carbon was very poor and fell off the radar. So it's definitely been people look back with rose tinted specs on Need for Speed. And it sold well because everyone bought it because it was advertised so well. And this one, who knows? I mean, EA will throw a lot at it, but you know, this year is such a not just for racing games, but for games in general. Christmas is going to be, everyone's going to be fighting for your bucks, and it's going to be tough for Need for Speed to unless if it's a poor quality game, I think they could be in trouble.
I mean, we won't have long to wait because the game will be showcased at the upcoming EA Play event, which takes place in June. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see what direction they go with it. I mean, we had many complaints with Need for Speed 2015. You know, considering the 2-year development cycle as well, we expected the reboot to be, you know, a return to form for the series, and it just wasn't. So, like you say, if they do that again, if they release an underwhelming game, you know, it's really going to hurt the series, much like perhaps GT5 and GT6. I mean, they were good games, don't get me wrong, but they didn't innovate enough, and ultimately, you know, people were disappointed with them. I mean, GT6, a good game in my opinion, certainly, but you know, the sales figures don't lie. They were much, you know, dwindling sales compared to earlier games in the series, and you just feel that Need for Speed, you know, could end up really hurting itself if they don't kick out a good game this year.
Yeah. pressure on that team to deliver. The last game didn't deliver in any way, and I'm surprised they released it in the state they did.
Yes.
Frankly, you know, so especially given that it was in development for a lot longer than normally for speed games.
I mean, is it too hard to ask for cockpit view and manual gears? You know, it's the basics.
Manual gears and steering wheel compatibility.
Yeah.
I mean, no manual gears, no manual gears. I just couldn't believe that was in. I thought I've had manual gears in games for the last 30 years.
It was probably the biggest blunder since Grid 2 eliminating the cockpit view altogether.
To an well, in a way, yeah. Even went away. Well, much worse than that. I mean, the cockpit view was blown out of all proportion by a small group of fans. You know, they said only 5%. It's actually true. Only 5% of a lot of people use cockpit view. It's not well used, a cockpit view.
Yeah.
You know, I tend to use bonnet cam quite a lot on games myself because the cockpit view is limiting your view. It's not realistic. Even though you're in a cockpit, you can't see out the whole width of the car. So, but yeah, it was the omission of manual gears is part of the driving experience fundamentally, and it's supposed to be a game for car fans. You know, and they've got all these amazing cars and these amazing mods, and no manual gears and no steering wheel compatibility. I mean, that's, you know, you've got Ken Block and this guy, what's his name, Magnus. Who are all about driving and night driving and talking about what it's like driving. And yeah, game's got no manual gears, mate. Do you drive an automatic? These guys wouldn't be seen dead in an automatic ever. No. So, you know, that just goes to show you where the game was totally disconnected from the image it was portraying. So we'll just wait and see with this one. EA are not showing it to us, that's for sure. So, but we'll do our best to try and get a look at it at E3, or, you know, if we do get to the EA Play event, that'll be nice. But if we don't, we'll there's no doubt going to be a trailer anyway. So we'll look at.
Just a quick question, Ed. I know you're a massive fan of Most Wanted 2005. How did you?
Don't say 2015.
No. How did the 2012 version stack up for you? Was it as poor as we found it? To us, it sort of lacked soul.
I went round a friend's house because, well, basically, coming up to it, I realised it was going to be a crap game. So I let a friend buy it first. And I went round his house and I played it, and then decided not to buy it. So yeah, that's my opinion of that game. Because
awful.
Yeah, I mean,
what I did instead was I went on Amazon and I bought myself the Xbox 360 version of Need for Speed 2000, Most Wanted 2005, and I've probably completed that game another 10 times since then. I mean, it's
yeah, it just goes to show how they've lost their way. You know, you're such a big fan of Most Wanted 2005, and yet you just didn't entertain the modern version. You know, so they really need to sort of go back to the drawing board and find out what it is that makes people come back to this series. You know, many years after they're releasing these games, you know, you really need to strike gold with this one.
With the last game they brought out, there was an underlying philosophy and attitude in there, in the way that they were including people from the actual car culture, like modified car culture, was actually involved in the making of that game. But everything that actually influenced was just cosmetic. There was nothing in the way that the game actually played, and I don't know, like the story of the game and how it actually developed as you played through it. None of that was influenced at all. So there was a lot of hype, and there was a lot of cool sort of elements of the way the game looked, and what you could do to the cars, and who was involved. You know, got these cutscenes with like Ken Block walking around and Frederick Asbo just like having a beer with you and stuff. And it's like, holy crap, this is cool. And you know, it's like the sticker of my mate's blog was in it. It was, you know, it's awesome to see that kind of stuff happening in a game. It's just sort of unheard of. And then you play it and the handling's crap. There's no manual gears, and I don't know, it's open world, but the whole place feels like a big racetrack. It's like not actually open world. So it's, I don't know, it sort of lost its way in terms of actual gameplay. If they can get the core mechanics down and, I don't know, have police that actually work, then the
fact the police didn't work for me was a real I was really looking forward to that, and they just were blind. You just couldn't get a
Terrible.
police chase going. It just wasn't happening. And I was driving at 1 mile an hour trying to get the police to go for me, and they were losing me. They were blind. A cop chase wouldn't last for more than a few seconds. I'd just speed off away from them. Oh, it was compared to some of the unbelievable police chases I've had in previous versions of Need for Speed, it was really disappointing. So there's so much heritage, there's so much rich content for them to look into and bring back. It doesn't need to be an entirely new experience, but yeah, it didn't, like you say, it just didn't get the car culture that it was targeting at all. And
Visually it did, but
visually it did. I mean, the cars look amazing, but it was like I was saying, though, the city was dead. My big problems were that, okay, so there's these 4 famous people in the city. Where's the rivals that you're up against competing for their attention? Where's, there should be like, hey, we're a group of guys, but there should be like 10 groups of guys competing for Ken Block's attention, and you've got to beat them. And you see bits of scenes where you're competing against them. There's got to be, when it's early evening or in the morning, you should see traffic where people are getting up and going to work, and there's more traffic, and perhaps the police are more alert at those times of day than they are in the middle of the night. There needed to be a life to the city where you felt it waking up and going to bed, and there needed to be car meets, car owners club meets and stuff. Hey, meet up with all the people who own this car in this location, and then they could just cruise around the city together and stuff.
I mean, what if your career progression was driven by you're driving along and you go past a car park, there's a big car meet going there, and you turn up and smash everyone at a drag race that they do at the end of the car park? I mean, what if that built up some sort of respect points, and then that's how you progress yourself to the point where you're actually like meeting someone like Ken Block, and he's like, right, I've seen what you've been doing, let's take this to a track. And go from there. Or I'm making a Gymkhana event in that same car park. We'll go around and do some donuts around a cone, and earn some credits or whatever. And then I don't know, it's just a bit of atmosphere. When I was when I went to Japan for the first time, the first night I went to a garage and hung out with some guys there, and we went to a 7-Eleven, and just because this guy was out, like him and a couple of his mates went to a 7-Eleven, and word got around, and before you knew it, there was like 10 or 15 drift cars all turning up at this 7-Eleven, just because they knew that this guy was out and about that night. And if something like that happened, where you could like go and park up somewhere in a game, and other cars came and arrived because you've been somewhere, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about things like that, being able to rev your car, and being able to play loud music out of your car as well when you drive along and stuff, so you can cruise or by having it booming out. Little things that would be great, in terms of an online world, and what kind of additions you could have to the car that was unique. But again, like you say, this is all superficial. First you need the core driving to be correct, the car, the way the car looks. I mean, one thing I would like to see better improvement from a lot of games companies on is tire smoke. When you're drifting, it'd be great to see the smoke oscillating around the tire and then oscillating off of it to create a natural looking drift sort of smoke. And it doesn't happen like that, it just all puffs out from the car, but it's still, they haven't quite got that right. And I'd love to see the fundamentals of the core car driving. But like you say, times of day, I mean, you should have all spectrums of times of day, but it's one thing having all times of day, but the game should change during the day as during the night. So, a lot more cop chases during the day, a lot more traffic on the road, whereas at night, perhaps the cops are a bit more lax, and then you can do more races and drift events and stuff, and more the car meets would happen at night, stuff like that. So I don't know, they've got a lot to draw on. We haven't got a clue what it's going to be like. We'll wait and see.
Yeah. So I think just to wrap up the news, we'll mention that the snow-based racer from Zordix, Snow Moto Racing Freedom, has a release date. So it's coming on April 11 for the PlayStation 4 and PC. Now, this is not to be confused with their water racer, Aqua Moto Racing Utopia. So basically, in Snow Moto Racing Freedom, you race on snowmobiles across 40 courses. And the development team are keen to point out that none of them are actually mirrored. So it's 40 courses. That's pretty decent, I've got to say. We have 12 snowmobiles and 18 championships. And of course, you've got usual online and local multiplayer. So, you know, it looks like a sort of throwback to old school races. So it'd be interesting to see how this one turns out. We're not got long to wait to see.
I'm worried it's, you know, I mean, there's just the one trailer, isn't there? I mean, oh, and there's the new trailer, GDC, I see you've got on the site. It just still looks a bit rough. That's all. It doesn't look polished enough at the moment, and it still looks a bit, I don't know, a bit unpolished. But it'll be interesting to see. Either way, we'll see if we can get hold of it and make a video.
Yep. Right, and I think we should move on to the Q&A. So over on Twitter, Kratos asks GT Sport gameplay and graphics opinion. Well, we've pretty much covered that, haven't we? So
yeah, I mean, it looks nice, and handling. Well, if we play the beta, we'll tell you more.
Yep. Beverly asks, any news about a new Formula One game?
No news yet. Codemasters are, you know, working on it. We know that. So I would say shouldn't be too long. I guess the first trailer would normally be, I guess, late May, something like that. Maybe there should be a trailer in May. So just a few weeks off. Yeah, if we're aiming for a September launch, then we'll see.
It'd be interesting to see the campaign, the marketing campaign, because last year they brought out all these hot laps, and to be honest, it got a bit tedious because they were showing, you know, very boring one car on track gameplay. You know, they've done that time and time again as the sort of Formula One, real world Formula One races came around, and to me that just didn't excite me. You know, they were showing off different times of day, which was a new feature, but I hope they spruce it up a bit for this year's game.
Yeah, I mean, they will. The Codemasters will always talk about limitations. They'll always blame FIA or FOM for what they can and can't show. So they might be restricted in that way. But either way, we should have some gameplay in June, either way on the channel. So keep an eye out for that.
Yep. So Urso67 asks, any news on the T700 Thrustmaster wheel for GT Sport?
Well, I mean, there's nothing confirmed on it at all yet. You know, again, it's designed to launch with GT Sport. So when GT Sport launches, we'll know more. But I am going to keep an eye out at E3. I'm sure it's going to be somewhere at E3. So I'll be looking for it, and if I can see it, I'll fondle it and give you my feedback.
Yeah, it does look like a good meaty piece of kit, I got to say. Right, so Gary Jones asks a question on MXGP 3, but we've already pretty much covered that on the scrubs, manual scrubs. Good to see that feature in. So over on Facebook, Angus Parker says, glad to finally see some news on the Isle of Man game. What else do you expect in the world of bike games this year?
Well, you know, not much else. I really do think that it could be just MXGP3, MotoGP, and Isle of Man this year.
Yeah.
I think next year we could see a Ride 3 in 2018, maybe late 2018. So that would be a long way off at the moment. But I think those are the core ones this year.
I mean, there are a couple of arcade racer bike games which were supposed to come out last year. So we have Road Redemption and Road Rage. So one of them is an open world game. I get them mixed up, I must admit, so I'm not sure which is which. I think it might be Road Redemption, which is open world. So that'd be an interesting concept there. Although the graphics do look pretty dated, it has to be said. Whereas Road Rage is more of a sort of throwback to Road Rash. So although they're both arcade games, they do have pretty different approaches. So it'd be interesting to see how they sort of stack up against the other bike titles this year. But mainly it's the stuff we're looking forward to is more sort of simulation end of the spectrum, I guess. And, you know, like you say, Alan, you know, I'm very much looking forward to Ride 3, and hopefully it'll be on the Unreal Engine 4 with the improved graphics and sound. And I think that would be absolutely amazing. That's one of the games that I'm really looking forward to, you know, should it be on the Unreal Engine 4.
Yeah, I mean, that's still, like you say, could be as much as 2 years away at the moment. Yeah. So certainly a long way off. But yeah, I mean, it's nice to see a resurgence in the bike genre going on at the moment. There is a resurgence. They are getting better all the time, and it's all thanks to Milestone, who just haven't given up on the genre. They are very passionate, and it's driving everyone forward. So Ride 2 means that the reference material we now have in Ride 2 compared to compared to the Isle of Man, is going to be interesting to compare them both, as they both have street circuits. So I look forward to it. There's been a screenshot which hasn't gone up on the website yet, but there is a screenshot that's been floating around on Twitter this week of some of the actual riders that have tried it, and it looks quite nice in the screenshot. So some nice detailed visuals there. So we'll wait and see.
Yep. So I think that's about it for now, unless anyone has anything to add.
No, I think that's about it for the moment. I will just say that obviously Formula One 2017 season preview we put up recently. We're going to have another blog coming up with my feedback on the Grand Prix, and I'll be doing more of that for the races this year and updating it on the website. If you're into Formula One and you like to or do anything really in terms of helping out with the website, in terms of video, of joining us on Team VVV, do let us know. Contact us from the Contact Us form on the website. Talk about the areas that you'd like to help out in, and it'd be great to add some more people and get more people involved in covering the various racing games, and that would be great. So especially in Formula One as well, if you're a big F1 fan and you're interested in being a part of our coverage, do let us know. So contact us on the website via the Contact Us page, and like you say, we can discuss it from there. But no, I think that's about it really, Kevin. It's a case of I'm off to EGX Res tomorrow, checking out some of the indie titles, and we'll have coverage on that coming up in the coming days as well.
Yeah, so we look forward to that. So thanks as always for listening. Keep your questions coming, and we'll see you again next time. Goodbye. Hello and welcome to the Team VVV podcast for your weekly racing game rambles. Now, you may have noticed I'm not Martin. I'm instead Kevin, and Martin, our regular Captain Slow and podcast host, was lucky enough to be watching the recording of Top Gear for the second time, I might add. The lucky